Alrighty, news of the day. I'm going to start this off by somebody asked in the last video, I wonder what Shannon eats during games. I eat fast food. Here's the funny thing. I've lost 35 pounds so far. So it's always the way it works. Anytime that I've wanted to lose weight, fast food. And I'll say this and we'll get into this. The calories you're eating with fast food. I found when I eat at home and I eat homemade meals, and I might eat larger portions. I might eat a lot more food. If you eat from a really nice restaurant, you might be eating actually more calories as well. So that's the thing. I make sure that I know what I'm eating. I know my calories. I know all that. And there you go. And there's various chains. It's no particular one chain. Various. Now, let us get into hockey news of today. The Montreal Canadiens apparently are talking contract extension with Victor Mete. He's got his first goal, so that's going to drive the price mildly. I like Mete. I would think that it'd probably be a bridge deal, and I really do. I like the kid a lot. And it's clear that the Montreal Canadiens as an organization do as well. So nice to see him finally get a first goal. I hope he gets more. I think the offense is there. I think he's a very decent, well-rounded defenseman who, as time goes on, should continue to improve. Toronto. So tonight, Hutchinson's going to get start against Montreal, and I feel bad for the guy. I feel bad for the guy because, let's be honest, over the last 2 seasons before this one, he wasn't in the NHL very much. He spent most of his time in the American League. And he is basically one of those in-between AHL, NHL backup type guys. Peter Budaj is a good example of that as well, where Budaj could come in, he could play well for short periods, and he could have a pretty good season as a backup. But, as his career went on, he was in the AHL a lot, and then every now and then he'd show up back in the NHL. And Hutchinson sort of reminds me of him. The thing is, what Toronto needs is they need a backup that will allow Anderson more rest than he normally gets. So the pressure on Hutchinson to be better than he's been for the last couple of years is going to be strong. And I feel bad for the guy because I don't know that he can live up to what fans are going to expect. And I always say this too, backup goalies, they're backup goalies because they're not as good as the starters. If they were as good as the starters, they'd be a starter. And that's one of the sad truths of the situation. So hopefully he has a good game tonight against Montreal because he does feel some pressure to win. And it's like, it's 4 games into his season and you already get people sticking microphones in his face talking about struggling. And yeah, his numbers aren't fantastic, but here's the thing. His numbers are not completely out of line with the numbers he posted over the last couple of seasons. It's just kind of what you're getting. So when, the Leafs got rid of Sparks, and I saw a lot of Leaf fans saying, well, we got Hutchinson, we're fine. I remember thinking, but is Hutchinson an upgrade over Sparks? Like, you're looking for a backup that's an upgrade over what you've had. So, it's an odd situation with Toronto. I'm not sure where this ends up. Maybe Kaskasuo ends up being that backup goaltender. He's putting up really good numbers in the American League so far this year. Maybe that ends up being an option. But the pressure on Hutchinson, I feel for the guy. With Manson moving to the injured reserve for the Ducks, there's room for Goodbranson on the roster. When everybody's healthy, they're going to have to make a move. Somebody's going to have to go. And it'll be interesting to see how Goodbranson does with the Anaheim Ducks right out of the gate. St. Louis fans, of course, may be a little bit nervous because of Vlad Tarasenko being out. Looks like Sammy Blais will be on that top line. Sundqvist, they were saying, is skating on that top line this morning. So Tarasenko out, he'll be reevaluated next week. So he's not playing the games this weekend. He'll be reevaluated next week. The good news for St. Louis is they have lots of depth. They do. The St. Louis Blues, one of the best teams in the league when it comes to depth. That's how you win a Stanley Cup in 2019. And so I don't anticipate them losing a bunch of games while Tarasenko's out. I wasn't surprised by, but it's a headline on Sportsnet, so I thought I'd throw this in here, that Brendan Dillon won't get a hearing for the hit on Matthews. Was there head contact on the hit? Absolutely. Could it have been a penalty? Sure. Suspension or fines? No. I didn't see anything premeditated in it. Matthews wasn't happy about it at the time, and he ended up going for his moments in the quiet room because they have concussion protocol. And I'm really glad to see concussion protocol seems to be uh, getting employed properly this year. There were times last year where we saw players just shaking it off like, "Nah, I'm not going to the quiet room. I'm fine." And this year, I'm trying to think of a time during a game where I've seen that. I can't remember seeing a player just shake off the trainer and go, "Nah, I'm not going." So hopefully that's the case from now on. That we don't see players just going, "Nah, I'm fine." There's nothing worse than seeing a guy get hurt and "Nah, I'm fine," and then you find out after the game that he played the rest of that game with a concussion. That's just, that's a disaster waiting to happen. So yeah, I don't think Dylan necessarily deserved a hearing, but I can understand why it's kind of news because of the fact that it was on a Matthews head. And here we go with the headlines, right? Patrick Laine got off to an amazing start. Patrick Laine is a streaky player. He goes through these periods where he's fantastic, and then he's kind of invisible. And according to the advanced stats through the first 10 games, that first line for the Winnipeg Jets has been a bit of a problem when it comes to passing and everything else. And they analyze so many things with advanced stats that I just say forget it. But in that community, they will point out that Laine, while he causes a lot of high danger chances at the other end of the ice, he does pressure on the puck. It also means that defensively that line has some issues, and passing wise there's some issues. The Jets in general, when your team is 5-6, there are issues going around. And one thing I will say is that when you're looking at lines like that, and you've got to remember that that blue line has just been decimated, having a blue line that is completely revamped and one could argue downgraded with guys like Trouba, Myers, and Bufflin not being back there, it's going to affect how the forwards play. Knowing who's behind them has changed, and knowing that there's more pressure on them, that you can't say, all right, well, if you have this turnover, it's fine. Myers will bail it out. Buff's back there. We got Buff back there as like a fourth forward sometimes. So they don't have that this year. So I can understand on some level looking at it and looking for Laine to be the problem, but I don't consider that to be it. The thing is, the Jets right now, when Laine's scoring goes cold, as it does at given points during any given season, they just don't have the other pieces in place that can cover, as would have been the case last year or the year before. It's been remarkable, the difference between the Winnipeg Jets that finished the playoffs last year and the team that's played the first 11 games of the season so far. I also want to talk a little bit about Ottawa because they're discussing DJ Smith and how he's going to hold players accountable like Bobby Ryan and others. That's got to be tough for him. It's got to be tough for him because this is a roster that is not star-studded. This is a roster where, let's say Nemesnikov has a miserable night and you're gonna bench him. Okay, the thing is for Ottawa, they don't have a great roster, and you kind of need those guys out there, whether it's a Bobby Ryan or Vlad Nemesnikov, because you don't have that top end talent. And you may very well be pressing a guy like maybe Logan Brown gets pressed into minutes that he may not be ready for. And then there's the other problem too, where everybody expects Ottawa to be terrible. And so far, they're terrible. And so how does that affect you as a player? In the locker room, on the ice, in between games? Players read press. They'll say they don't, but players read press. How does that affect everything? And then when the coach is benching you, are you like, I don't know, like how many players in Ottawa are going to end up saying we wouldn't mind going somewhere else? And that's a question, right? So DJ Smith has quite the challenge with Ottawa. I'm not sure what the solution is there either. And it's one of those times where, when people say, "Oh, wouldn't you like to be a coach?" No, I would not enjoy that. That would be pretty awful. To be honest, you need to have a special skill set to be a coach in professional sports and professional hockey as well. And I don't envy DJ Smith's job because the expectation was that Ottawa would get better this year. Not from the fan standpoint, certainly not from a media standpoint, but I think from ownership and from management, meaning Pierre Dorian, I think the expectation is okay, last year was terrible. We're going to start getting better this year. And the roster just isn't there to do it. So here's a coach kind of being expected, all right, things should get a little better this year. And he's like, with what? So we'll see how things go in Ottawa this year and what kind of patience we see with the process overall, say January, February, depending on how many wins they've got at that point. I wanted to close this out with something that was going on Twitter, and it made everybody melt down, and it's stupid. I'm sorry, but it's stupid. Online polls are generally dumb. They're and I've had polls for the channel. I've done that. I've had polls for the channel, and that's fine. They're fun thing to have, but you got to take everything with a grain of salt. Well, Carolina, and they mentioned this during today's game, that their fans have been voted the best fans in the NHL, and they're all like, yeah, we know we're the greatest fans in the league, and the greatest fans are in Carolina, which of course causes a bunch of fans and other fan bases to lose their minds. And what are you talking about? Carolina doesn't have the best fans. What fans? Their arena's empty all the time. Like, it just sets up all of your standard remarks. And in the finals, it was a matchup between Carolina fans and Nashville fans. So, and I've seen comments like, oh, good, fans in the South are finally respected. And I'm thinking, well, no, this was a fan poll. So this was one of those ones where you post it and then people can like block vote. Well, you may see like, okay, for instance, Toronto. I've mentioned this before, right? So you're a Toronto fan. All right, you may go and vote in this poll. You may get 6 fans who can't stand Toronto who might vote for whoever's against Toronto in that poll. You're like, I can't stand Toronto fans, and 6 of them vote. So measuring who the best fans are is ridiculous, because how do you measure fan bases? Vancouver, you sit in a Vancouver crowd to watch a hockey game, it's going to be a very quiet crowd compared to others. Now, that quiet can be seen as an educated crowd, a corporate crowd, a fickle crowd. You can see it. There's numerous ways to see that crowd. We're in Vancouver. It's always been that way dating back to the Pacific Coliseum, when it was called the Pacific Mausoleum, by people who came in and visited it. And again, fans would say, well, they didn't have anything to cheer about. But to other fans, it would be, those fans in Vancouver are dead quiet. They're not good fans. We're good fans. And what constitutes a good fan? I don't think we have an answer to that. Is it cheering when your team loses? Is it buying tickets while your team isn't any good? Is it cheering when they win? I think we can all agree that the whole bandwagon thing kind of gets aggravating. But again, if you have a team that's always good, does that mean that, like, for instance, Pittsburgh for over a decade now has been pretty darn good? So is it just like that they're good? And again, people say, well, yeah, Pittsburgh, when they aren't any good, they threaten to move, and then they get a superstar. So best fans in the league is so subjective. And it's why I don't do this. I don't do best fans. I don't even get into like best arena. Although best arena, you could have some objective views on that. And once I've toured all 31, I'd be glad to give my opinion. This year I intend to be in 3 different arenas during regular season games. We have, of course, Vancouver. I'm going to see 6 different games in Vancouver this year. I would like to go to a Vegas game while we're in Vegas during spring break, which is 3rd week of March. Tickets tend to be expensive. I'll look on the secondary market like on the day of the game, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. It's not a big deal if I don't see a game while I'm there. And then we're going to be, in all likelihood, in California in January. And it would be fun to go to a Ducks game while we're in Disneyland, because it's right there. So, I that would be 3 arenas. But again, I'm not going to go in there going, these are the best fans. I've been in Vegas. I've been in Vancouver. I've seen games in both. And if you ask me, well, which fans are better, I would say that's stupid. That's not something you can measure. You can't measure best fans. You just can't. You can measure most fans. You can measure loudest fans. But that doesn't necessarily mean best. Because the guy who's screaming and yelling next to you at a hockey game, you might want to take a pen and just give him a little jab in the temple with it. it doesn't necessarily mean he's a better fan than you are either. I have been around some very boisterous fans and thought, oh my God, why do I always have to sit near one of these people? But that, in some people's eyes, that would make that person a better fan than me. So again, this, insane. But again, I know most people will dispute this, but there will be Carolina fans that say, no, we are the best fans. And it doesn't matter how many of us there are, it's how loud we are and how supportive we are. And again, it's so ridiculous. Even when I saw the matchups from the round of 16, from how it started, I was like, who decided this? Like, how do you start with 16? You're saying 15 fan bases don't belong in the vote? Who the heck decided that was like, and again, if it's, well, they took a poll beforehand, well, still, it's all subjective and internet. All right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always, because this again is a contentious subject, but it's entertaining to me on some level. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.